I thought it'd be interesting to have kind of an intergenerational conversation on Reagan. And so Danielle, my daughter Danielle D'Souza Gill, is in town. By the way, she's the author of the book The Choice, The Abortion Divide in America. She's the host of the show Counterculture with Danielle D'Souza Gill. It's on Epoch TV. You can get it by downloading the Epoch Times app. And so Danielle, you were born after Reagan. You were born in the Clinton era. I'm sort of chuckling because I'm actually thinking about a photo that we have when you were almost a baby, where you're with Gerald Ford, and he's sort of reaching out to pick you up. And of course, this was at an American Enterprise Institute function. And Ford, of course, was part of that. But Reagan at that point, I think, had faded from the scene. Now, you know about Reagan by watching older videos of Reagan, the Goldwater speech, a couple of other Reagan speeches. Talk a little bit about how when you see those speeches, you see a man from a different time. What do you see, and what was your take about when you look back at Reagan through the speeches you've watched?
Well, his speeches, I think, are some of just the most incredible speeches. Listening to them, they're really, I think, a mixture of informative but also very inspiring. But I think just listening to people from that time, even not just Reagan, but even news hosts and talk show hosts and other things like that, they just spoke in a different way. And I think today, because of maybe technology and social media, people want everything, quick. They just want kind of punchy everything. Whereas back then, I think there was a much more deep dive into issues and into topics. And I try to do a deep dive like that, on my show and stuff. But I think in general, people just want things fast. And I think that's affected how our politicians talk, for better or worse. Not to say that either is better, but I just think it's a different type of speech to listen to Reagan from that time really go into things in so much more, almost a literary way even. He'll make, analogies and use a lot more descriptive language than politicians might do today.
I mean, I think if you think back to, say, Reagan's Evil Empire speech, this is the great speech where Reagan, in blunt moral terms, describes the West as a force for good, the Soviet Empire as a force for evil. And if you listen to that speech, you learn a lot about communism. In other words, Reagan makes the case. He doesn't just assume you're against communism, we're good, they're horrible. He lays out how they see the world, how we see the world. So his speech has, when you said informative, there's an educational component to that. Mm-hmm. And I find that has almost disappeared from American politics, on our side as well. I mean, if you think of Trump forcefully states his position, but he rarely lays out the argument. Even for free markets, Trump won't say, here's the reason that markets work, here's the reason that entrepreneurs are more productive and contribute more to society. And you said that that's partly because of social media. Is it partly because social media also creates a different kind of person, more hurried, less explanatory?
Yeah, and I think also back then, Reagan, of course, was much more focused on, I guess, speaking in a way that kind of brought everyone in on something, whereas I think now we're in such a deep fight with the left that it would almost be silly if we were to try to explain the fundamentals of a free market or things like that. Of course, we should do that, and I know that we do have other ways of doing that, but I don't think that's exactly what our politicians are up to. I think at this point our politicians try to say, this is my position, and if you agree with my position, then you should support this because this is like the fight of our lives, so we have to really buckle down and go hardcore. And a lot of people resonate with that. So it's not to say that that's not working. I think it does work because people are just at the breaking point. A lot of people are. They're so tired of, as Trump is so famous for, but speaking on behalf of the forgotten man and woman of America, so we want to speak on behalf of those people. Whereas I think Reagan was more speaking to those people, or perhaps to convince those people, whereas I think Trump represents those people.
That's a very interesting point. I mean, I'd almost say, would you agree with this, that if you take something like the family, Reagan assumed that a family is a good thing. right? That we want stronger families. Now, there might be people who don't have families, they're orphans, they're raised in single families, but it would have been inconceivable to Reagan that somebody would be like against the family. I mean, I think Reagan would think that was just, you have to be, there's something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. But we live at a time now where the left aggressively attacks the idea of the family. They seem to be, and some of the Black Lives Matter rhetoric, they explicitly want to dismantle the traditional family. Mm-hmm. And so part of what you're saying is that the Reagan tone, even though there's a little bit of us that pines for it, wouldn't work today because we're in a different environment.
Yeah, we are in a different environment. And I also think it's the role of the president or whoever is running on our side to fight for families, to fight for those things, because we all realize just how extreme it's gotten. We know that gender, just everything, even just the basic unit of the family is under attack. And perhaps someone else, maybe we would, or maybe Larry Elder would explain the importance of, the father in the home, or go into more details to convince someone of that. But in general, I think mostly the politicians are focusing on hopefully winning these things.
I mean, for Reagan, I think the opponent, the real opponent, was always abroad. Reagan was a creature of the Cold War. The Soviets were the focus of evil in the modern world. I think we would have to say, and this would, I think, reflect Trump's philosophy, that we're in a different landscape in which the great threat to America now is domestic. It comes from within. And quite frankly, if you listen to the left, it sounds like they agree. They think that the biggest threat to the world is us. And we think the greatest threat to the world is them. But we agree that we would locate the focus of the struggle domestically and not internationally. And that is a real chasm that separates the Reagan era from today.
Right, and I think that's what Trump would have in common perhaps more with Abraham Lincoln, because the threat is from within, and it was very divided times. And so I know Trump has compared himself to Lincoln, and so you can see the Trump-Lincoln behind us. But yeah, I think Reagan's time period was definitely more with the conflict abroad, and people's love of Reagan is so deep, almost in a very affectionate way, whereas I think people's love of Trump is so deep, but in a self-identifying way, in the sense that people feel like they're more like Trump because Trump is them in a way, whereas Reagan is a little bit more of an ideal figure. So I think that people love both of them, but just in very different identifying ways.
Very interesting.